Hello and welcome to the next episode of What's Up with Startups. And today with me is James Hanna from Parity. Hello, James.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. And Parity is a company that works in what people call like a first fuel economy, right? The energy efficiency.
That's right. Yep, very focused on energy efficiency and just great interactivity as it pertains to the real estate market.
Great. Could you explain to the people who are not familiar with the company what you do, like in simple terms?
Yeah, so we I think occupy a fairly niche but growing space of the energy transition industry where we're really focused on managing and automating the reduction of energy consumption in buildings. And the way that we do that is we're focused on optimizing the performance of existing heating, cooling, and ventilation systems, primarily in large urban apartment buildings and hotels. So you can think about what we do as an automation solution that remotely operates these big pieces of equipment to squeeze out all of the energy waste by getting a better understanding of what the real-time demand in the building is and automatically operating that equipment to follow that demand. And then increasingly, we're able to allow that equipment to interact with the grid in increasingly useful ways. So demand response, demand management, peak load management, time of use optimization. There's this whole host of opportunities that are starting to present themselves as the way that buildings interact with the grid is really evolving.
So your target market is like the residential buildings, and you help them save on the electricity and heating bills by using your proprietary software, if I'm correct.
That's right. Yep. So it's proprietary software that's cloud-based, but critically, our model is not to use proprietary hardware. So, a big part of what allows a company like Parity to exist is this real, I'll go as far as to say, a revolution that's occurred in the HVAC space and the control space, where you have open communication protocols that have really become the standard. So you have protocols like Modbus, now BACnet, that allow a third party to integrate with existing equipment and gain, read, but also critically for what we do, write capabilities to that equipment.
Okay. Let me, just before we dive in, how Parity is growing, and it's growing explosively, as I see. So you managed now about 17,000 square of property, I think. That's about 1.5 thousand square meters.
Yeah, about 70 million square feet.
Oh, million, sorry. That was my mistake.
No problem. That's yeah, so it's that number's grown quite a bit. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you highlighted is that we are focused on a very specific type of the real estate or segment of the real estate market. We're not going after every type of building. We found that our solution has a really strong fit within these continuously occupied buildings, so apartment buildings and now hotels, where you don't really have the ability just to do a big nighttime setback or weekend setback where you can ramp down the speed or the operation of all this equipment, right? And you think about a building, the majority of energy consumption is going to be consumed by the HVAC systems in a building. So in an office building, let's say, when everyone leaves at the end of the day, you can ramp everything down, or over the weekend, you can ramp everything down. In a hotel or an apartment building, you don't have that ability, right? Because people are in the building 24/7, 365. So it's really hard to know where these maybe 20-minute, hour-long windows exist to ramp down the speed of a pump or the runtime of a boiler or whatever it might be, to meet the demand where it is, and then automatically ramp things back up so you're not causing any comfort issues or thermal issues in the building. So there's a really good fit there. And we also find that in the types of buildings that we're focused on, you don't have as big a property team, as big a technical team as you might find in a big Class A commercial office building. Typically, there's less people being asked to do more with less. So there's a lot we can do to really help the operators out in the building, in addition to generating savings and revenue for the owner or asset manager.
Okay, let me as I wanted to kick off with an anecdote that, well, not an anecdote actually, a story I heard from a friend of mine. Think about like 10 years ago. So I had a friend who was like a CEO of a water utility. And he told me that he had a friend that was involved in energy efficiency. That it was his main business, kind of energy efficiency. That was in Russia a long time ago. And this CEO of water utility told me, well, I meet with my friend like once a year, twice a year. So we sit down for a drink, and then I ask, and we talk about this and we talk about that. And then I ask him, let's say his name is Mikhail. Mikhail, how is your energy efficiency businesses going? And he would look at me and say, friend, let's have a drink. So and he wouldn't go into this. And that was every year it would be the same. So he wouldn't talk about it. He would say, no, it's not going anywhere. And I had a few run-ins with energy efficiency project myself. And as the latest being last year in Turkey, for example, what I found is that it's extremely hard to convince a property owner, be it a residential building or factory, whatever, to invest in energy efficiency and invest in that using outside help. So the moment you describe it, first of all, they're not listening to it. When they start listening to you describe them, all the wonderful savings they're going to make, they go like, thank you very much. We're going to do it ourselves. And then you're left stuck. So basically, how did you manage to break that code in your business?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something, for better or for worse, I've spent my whole career dealing with that question, right? Dealing with energy efficiency as it pertains to real estate. And I think the first thing you need to understand, and hopefully I'm not revealing myself as too much of a cynic here, but energy efficiency, energy management just generally is not a top priority for real estate organizations, generally speaking,
So true.
right?
So
right.
true.
And I think when I first started in this industry, I was sort of a naive young guy thinking that, oh my God, all these big buildings, they must be so excited to do all these great things, implement these technologies. And then you realize pretty quickly that, that's not their core business. And their job and, what these companies exist to do is to keep the buildings occupied, maximize the rent that they can charge, and maximize the net operating income of these buildings, and hold on to them for a long time or sell them for a profit. And that's really what they exist to do. So, I think the big realization that I've had over my career, and part of what attracted me to Parity, and part of why I saw a big opportunity, was that you have to make it easy. Energy efficiency can't be this big 5-course meal for real estate operators, because they just don't have the time. Generally there's interest and people say, yeah, if we can find a way to do it, let's do it. But you got to make it easy. And you also have to make sure that incentives are aligned and the way that you're deploying it is really solving problems, really, helping them in more than just, one way. So I think with Parity, that's really been the guiding principle of the company, is not just to have a technology solution that's cool and we know is going to be able to generate some value. It's also bundling it up into a service that allows real estate owners and operators to procure it in a way that makes sense for them. So I think that's one of the fundamental principles that we've learned. And I think the other thing too is we are in some ways trying to invert how energy efficiency has been sold previously. For a long time, the energy efficiency industry has been about hardware. So you're saying, I'll install more efficient lighting and you'll see savings as a result of that. We'll install a more efficient boiler or put insulation in your building or whatever it might be. And as a result of that hardware, you're going to see a savings. What we're trying to do is saying, we don't really want to install hardware. In some cases, we might need to install a little bit of controls or automation infrastructure, but we're really just trying to get the maximum performance out of what you already have in the building through our stuff. So I think it's a more unique value proposition. And I think generally speaking, real estate companies are good at doing construction and good at installing things, but they're not software companies. So I think having, a piece of software like ours, an automation solution that can, extract more value out of an investment they've already made, that aligns pretty well, I think, with how real estate firms generally look at investments and kind of look at how to run their properties.
So the two things, one, you got rid of the hardware solutions, which are hard sell because that's kind of investment, it's a down payment. And the second is that you align with the construction company saying, okay, we have this asset, so we'll help you to squeeze every last possible thing from the existing assets that you have. But
Yeah,
how
exactly.
do you actually make it easy for them to grasp?
Yeah, so a big part of it is, we put some skin in the game. So we'll guarantee a certain level of savings that we're going to generate through the optimization that we're providing. So, when by doing that, we're basically saying that you don't necessarily need to be an expert in controls, automation, understand all the nuts and bolts of how this works because it's complicated, right? Energy for real estate companies can be hard to wrap your head around. Just for anyone, can be hard to wrap your head around, right? It's not a tangible thing, right? And then HVAC is complicated. The utilities, the grid is complicated. So, we decided to put a guarantee in place just to help people understand that you are going to see typically a very good return on investment one way or another through implementing our service, just to make it a very kind of financially geared type of service. I think that's really helped. And it helps to give people comfort that they're going to see savings because, in energy efficiency, it's not as straightforward as in, let's say, rooftop solar to measure and validate the impact that you're having, right? If you think about, you put a solar PV system on the roof, you can just, very easily meter the amount of kilowatt hours that you're producing. Energy efficiently is inherently tied into the operations of the building. And the savings that are being generated can sometimes get lost in the noise of everything else that's going on. So a big part of what we do as part of the guarantee, but just generally as part of the service, is very detailed measurement and verification. And then we report on it and make it very clear and transparent what the savings have been so that people very quickly, can see that there's that impact and understand what it is and aren't sort of left saying, hey, we did this energy efficiency thing. Are we seeing savings? Are we not? Because, it's not as straightforward. So I think that's also a big piece of it, is sort of validating what we're doing and helping to, demonstrate the value that we're providing for our customers, not leaving them to have to do it. So I think that's also been, a really key part of the strategy.
The guarantee. Would I be without giving out any kind of your commercial secrets, what would you say is like the one item that helps you like achieve 80% of sales when you go into so you explain everything, you explain the software, you explain like the guarantee, you explain that you use an existing assets, you don't need to any investment, but when is the moment to what most of your customers say, now I understand, now I get it, I'm buying it, take my money, when that happens?
Yeah, it's interesting when you're dealing with real estate. I think there's a lot of different like secondary and tertiary benefits that different people will attach themselves to, but the universal language is ROI, right? What's the return on investment? What impact are you going to have the net operating income of the building? And we really try to optimize for that, right? So the lens at which we look at a building is not to say, let's pick up every different piece of equipment, right? Or sometimes we'll integrate through a BMS. Other times, if a building doesn't have one, we'll go in and just, pick up all the different, system level controls ourselves. We're not trying to pick every single one up, right? We're not trying to be a traditional, building management system for these buildings. So we'll only pick up the systems that we can generate an accretive return on investment through. which means that, we can go to the customer with an ROI that's going to, typically far exceed their minimum return rate that they need to see for this type of thing, which I think, is in contrast to what a lot of energy efficiency, looks like, right? I mean, I think if you look at the energy efficiency, the types of energy efficiency measures that have gained a lot of traction over the years, LED is kind of at the top, right? Because it was easy to understand, but also the economics were really strong, right? I mean, you're talking about paybacks of a year, 2 years, sometimes less than a year, sometimes a little bit longer, but that's sort of the world that we're in with what we do, where you just kind of have such a strong business case that it makes it hard for people to look the other way. So it sounds simple, nothing really revolutionary there, but I think that's kind of part of the approach of kind of understanding how real estate people look at this, what they care about, and delivering that.
Okay. Well, this is actually crucial because I worked in district heating for some time, a couple of years. Actually, a lot, if I put it all together, more than 10 years, I think. And one of the things when we spoke about energy efficiency with the teams, I mean, you would get a lot of engineers on the teams like that, and they would go on endlessly on what you can optimize in a building. And basically, if you allow them to run free, they would optimize everything, but you would end up spending so much money on that. So your ROI would be like negative. So I think that it looks like you focus on this kind of simple measure, but at the same time, the complexity behind it, I would imagine, is huge. Could you tell me what I'm leading to is in our preparatory talk, we talked about your system that you have, the building integration process, as I understood. It's a building integration process system, which is a kind of the secret weapon that you have behind. You don't need to show it to the customer. The customer doesn't care about it. He cares about ROI. But to get that ROI, you have that process. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, yep. And I think before getting into that, one thing that's important to understand about what we do is, we are remotely controlling this equipment, right? Which I think is it sounds straightforward, but it's sort of a big step from the types of energy focused, prop tech smart building solutions that have been in the market for a while, where you might be pulling the same data out of the building, but you're providing alarms, alerts, recommendations, insights, dashboards that might have really useful insights, really useful information, but still requires someone to be in the building or somewhere on a BMS to get that information and then manually make an adjustment in order to see the benefit. So with what we do, where we're remotely controlling this equipment, and we need to get a really good understanding of the base operations of the equipment, it makes the integration really important, right? Because you can have the best algorithms in the market, right? You can have the best piece of software, but if that valve that you're trying to control is broken, you're not really gonna solve a lot of problems, right? Or if that pump has an old motor on it that you can't put a piece of automation equipment on, that's a problem, right? So it really, the way we look at it, it's got to be both the software piece needs to be really strong, but you also need to make sure, the building is ready to accept that software. And, you do what you need to enable the software and the ongoing service to deliver the value that the customer is signing up for. So, we like to say that we meet the building where it is on the hardware side. If a building has a BMS, we'll spend a lot of time understanding how the BMS is set up, what are the points we need to pick up, the underlying equipment, what condition is it in, and really make sure that
I'm sorry to interrupt you, James. The BMS,
Sure.
you mean the battery management system?
The building management system. Yeah.
I'm from the battery background, so
Okay. Yeah. No, I know when you start talking real estate and energy, the acronyms just all sort of mixed together. But yeah, building management system These have been around for a long time, and it's this, it's companies like Johnson Controls, Honeywell, Siemens, sort of the big building controls and big building systems companies, put these in, and what they are is a system that aggregates all the different system level controls in a building into one place. So you can remotely see what's happening and remotely go in and make, manual control adjustments, or kind of rely on, fairly basic programming typically to operate the equipment. And, those buildings can be good for us if they have one of those in place, because we can integrate with that BMS and pull all the points that are already on that BMS into our system. But even in those buildings, oftentimes we'll need to, do some level of retro commissioning, do some level of getting the hardware to a place where we can deploy our software, deploy our algorithms in a way that's going to generate a lot of value. And I think, from a scalability perspective, it does mean that we can't just go into every building across the world all at once, right? Because it's not a pure software play. But what it also means is there's just more of a kind of more infrastructure, more process, more of a moat that we have around what we do. Because once we're in these buildings and we've kind of gone through that process to integrate with them, we tend to be pretty sticky, because it ensures that we're generating maximum value. There's limited issues on the back end, and that's really worked for us so far. And as we get into more buildings, we're getting a better understanding for what the typical integration approaches are for the types of buildings that we come across. And we might talk about this a little bit later, but I think if we're trying to go into every type of building all at once, this wouldn't really work, right? Because you can only do so many bespoke types of integrations before you have a trouble, scaling that. So the fact that we're focused on very specific types of buildings, these urban apartment buildings and hotels, kind of has allowed us to develop a bit of a playbook for how we do that.
Okay, just before we go in, I'd like to go into that playbook that you just mentioned, but before we go there, so because you've been actively growing, and I think your US operations been like the bulk of the growth happened in US, and I can imagine how tempting it is to go for more buildings, but then especially if the building requires more tweaking, more hardware to add, the less profitable it would get for you, and the more time you would need to spend on it. How do you cut off? Where do you cut off and say, okay, no, this is not the building we're going to do, despite the fact that, okay, it's old and the energy saving could be huge and we could make a lot of money, but no, we're just going to spend so much time and so much effort on that. How do you stay?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think, particularly in energy efficiency, there's always a temptation to start doing a lot of different things, right? Because when you get into these buildings, you can see that, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. The owner or the property manager is asking you to do X, Y, and Z. And if you just said yes, then that's, a contract, that's revenue sitting right there in front of you. So that temptation is always there. And I think it's why you see a lot of energy efficiency companies out there that are very multifaceted. We are very intentionally just trying to stay in our lane and be the best in the market at this specific thing that we do. And then let, all the other companies out there that could, deal with a building that maybe we come into and just see that, the majority of the equipment is past its useful life. Doesn't make sense for them to have us go through the trouble of integrating with this equipment that they should really be replacing in the next year or two, right? So that would be an example of a situation where we just refer that building to an energy engineering company and say, you guys should really work with this company to upgrade all this equipment, and then we can come in on the back end and do our optimization. We don't want to turn into a big energy retrofit company doing deep retrofits or things like that. We really just want to focus on integrating with the equipment that's there, not replacing it wholesale. And then the other thing too is we'll come across portfolios where maybe there's 100 buildings in a portfolio, and there will be buildings that don't really have the right type of mechanical setup for what we do. So the temptation is also there to try to develop, a bit of a bespoke solution for those types of buildings. But again, we're resisting the temptation to do that because, that can take you off course, right? And when you're a startup like us, limited resources, limited things you can build and focus on, maintaining that focus is absolutely paramount, particularly, in the world that we're in today, right? Where there's just been so much investment in this space. And I think there will continue to be a lot of investment in this space. If you're not focused and trying to build the best product for the problem, the very specific problem you're trying to solve, you kind of open yourself up to get past. And I think that's something that's very front of mind for us.
Great. So I would just to finish up on this. So you would say, okay, if we have like mechanical things we need to fix before or automate now, it's out of equation, or there is something else. So okay, the building is there. You can basically get data from everything. There is a BMS, the building management system, and then you say, but what is is there any kind of rule of thumb which you would say, all right, if the building basically has all the sensors and data we need, but we are not taking it if something that, I don't know, or maybe there isn't.
So is the question just sort of, if we see a building where it's kind of got all the equipment that we need, is there a situation in there where we wouldn't want to work with that building?
Yeah.
For us, it's really about the mechanical setup of the building and the size. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, we're really focused on what return on investment we can deliver, what's the savings, the revenue that we can generate for our customers. So, certainly there's buildings that kind of check all the boxes, but it might be a little bit too small to generate enough savings revenue in order to deliver value, right? We also, at least at this stage, aren't focused on new construction buildings. So you might build a new construction building, ground up building that, is the right size, has all the right systems we could optimize, but because you don't have that sort of pre-parity baseline that we could use to generate savings off of and put a, estimated savings and revenue and guarantee on, the value proposition is a little less clear. So we think we'll start to get into that as we have customers that work with us with their existing buildings that kind of see the value that, will put us into their new construction buildings. But that's an example too of where, we're not quite focused on that, even though there's no technical reason why we couldn't. It's also, the amount of new construction apartment buildings and hotels in the markets that we serve is more limited now, just given some of the macroeconomic stuff going on, but see if that sorts itself out in the next year or two.
Okay, great. But it's great insights. Thank you very much for that, James, because I see startups, and I also was myself in that position when you start to grow or you make a splash. Even you don't even start to grow, you just make a splash in the media. And then you get all kinds of requests. Oh, look here, let's work with us, So they get to you and they say, this is so fantastic, you have so fantastic technology, and there is an opportunity to go here and go here. But you only have so much time, and your team is like small still. And you try to grow it fast, then you fail on your command and control structure, on your management instruments, and so on and so forth. So let's lead this into the playbook that you mentioned, that you have for working on the buildings and checking them to actually manage them. How did you build this up? Or is it a real playbook? You have like a physical book, or you have like a collection of videos which you make every new employee to memorize and pass exams?
Maybe one day we'll get there. But yeah, we're very much at that stage where it's kind of, getting to a size where we got to put more process out there, document things in ways that as we're hiring more people, we can get them up to speed quicker. So we're very much at that sort of inflection point as a company where trying to get a lot more stuff documented. But yeah, basically, right? I mean, we have take an urban apartment building, we have maybe 5 or 6 typical types of mechanical setups that we see in the types of buildings that are a good fit for us. And now we've looked at enough of those buildings, we're in enough of those buildings to understand, what the different variables can be, what the likely different, variations and, where on the spectrum of, controls infrastructure they might be, so that we have a pretty good idea for what we're going to need to do, before we even get into the building. So, we're now at a stage where we can actually take a few steps out of the upfront process to determine, what the integration plan is going to be and, what type of value we can provide to those buildings, which is a really exciting place to be because, we're doing that based on real experience, real data, real results, real world experience that we have, not just based on kind of making some educated, guesses on what we think it's going to be. So, that's exciting for my position because, when you're selling into real estate, it's a long sales cycle, right? You talk to anyone who's in, the what's called the property technology space that sells any type of technology, any type of project or software even into real estate, it takes a lot of time. So anything that you can do with the part of that you control, so on your side, whether it's engineering analysis or, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about here today, that's really valuable. So I think we're at a point now where we're starting to be able to do that because there's less unknowns, even though we deal with all sorts of, different vintages of buildings that are going to have, stuff from the 70s, they're still in the building to newer buildings that have more modern equipment.
Okay. So there is no playbook as physical yet, as I understand. But
yeah, we have elements of it, but yeah, I think having a true playbook is probably something that we'll have in the next little while here.
okay, it's one of the things I'm interested in is the systematization of knowledge that a startup accumulates during its growth phase, because especially when you grow fast, you have a lot of your people going different places, recording different conversations, different outcomes of particular interactions about with a client or with a supplier or, after sales. And then to actually, when you grow, the other thing is that you get more people on board and you need to get them up to speed very, very fast. Yeah. And so you need a kind of education tool for them. So one place I heard about, the people would just they would record everything on Loom, everything they do, basically, all the meetings, all the customer communications, and then they would just put it in the database, and they would have people who would, work on that database, sort this out, get some feedback from it, and then distribute it in the company. And then you say, okay, so you have a new bike. You need to watch video 1, 5, 7, and then 10 to 15. There you go. Then you'll speak to someone who's an expert on that to check whether you actually listened, and then you're all set. So that's not the stage you're in, I understand.
No, we're not quite there yet, but I think that's, that would be a good place for us to get to, right? I mean, right now we're about a 35 person company. We expect that number to increase quite a bit. And, just from prior experience, I think it's, once you're getting over, 50, approaching 100 people is where you can't rely on, as direct kind of training from, the more seasoned employees. So I think we see that coming, particularly, as we're planning on expanding geographically in a much more aggressive way. We've kind of had the luxury of having most of our team either be in the Toronto office or the New York office, where we're here, we're in the office, we can just kind of, jump in a conference room and kind of hash things out, or, all be in a room together, just kind of, talk to someone at the desk next to you. But as we grow, as we have a more geographically dispersed workforce, that's not going to be as possible. So a lot of what you're talking about, I think, is very much something that we'll be working on over the next 6 to 12 months. But the other thing that is maybe unique about us, but I think we're just in a fortunate position to have this, is we have a management team here that have been with the company for a number of years. And these are all people that really understand the ins and outs of what we do here, that have, kind of figured out, how we're doing what we're doing in their different parts of the business. And that's just an incredibly valuable resource to have where you're at a company like Parity, right? Because it means that we can put a lot more trust and rely on the team here to hire the right people that are going to be a good fit for their team, come up with a way that they want to train them for their team, right? Because the way that you would bring on a software developer versus a mechanical engineer versus a salesperson is going to be very different, right? The types of things that they need to understand, the parts of the business they need to understand, all those different processes. We really rely on the different division heads, the different managers to put that in place at that level of the company. So that's also been really helpful for us, and something we really want to continue to leverage as we get bigger.
Okay, great. Let's now zoom out a bit and come back to the market, but the market and investors. So lots of times startups go to investors and they describe the market and they describe how they're going to grow. And investors asking, well, what is the TAM, CAM, whatever. But you have a very laser focus on specific buildings, and you say, okay, we're going to grow, but how do you I would expect some investors to be a little bit skeptical about the growth possibilities, and some climate tech investors, and you're clearly there in a climate tech, would say, okay, we only want to look at the climate tech companies that have a possibility of a 10x exit.
Mm-hmm.
And how I would imagine that you, in your position as the lead in one of the biggest market that Parity is in, would be either preparing your founder team to talk to investors about that, or actually been talking to investors yourself about the market. Is it something that comes up? And if it does, how do you address that?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is, when we say that we're focused on, multifamily, right? And now we're also, getting into hotels. I think, yeah, at first people are like, oh, multifamily, how big a market can that be, particularly for energy management?
Especially in the United States, where you have this fixation with the single family houses. It's the
Right.
American dream. I would be okay with that, say, in Eastern Europe, but that's the norm. But
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's this kind of education process we need to go through with people to explain just how big a market this is, because it's a bit of a misconception, right? I think you've seen this trend of urbanization, across all of North America, or at least Canada and the United States. We've had a lot of buildings built that sort of fit very well into what we do. And it's been an overlooked market, right? I mean, if you think about energy management, energy efficiency, it's really all been focused for the most part on the commercial and industrial sector, office buildings, manufacturing, logistics, as well as hospitals and corporate real estate. That market has really been the focus. But now what you've seen is, coming out of the pandemic, where I think people are kind of, questioning what the future of the office market is, right? And kind of, you see a lot of those buildings that are in tough shape, or that are being converted, or there's plans to convert them into apartment buildings, that all of a sudden, I think there's this realization out there that, multifamily is a really, resilient asset class. And there's actually a lot more of this out there that is ripe for energy management than maybe people realized before. But the thing about multifamily is it's a very kind of fractured market, right? The types of
Yeah.
organizations that own and operate it are very, very different.
So
So
your
you
customer
can't,
acquisition cost could be significant.
well, you just really need to understand what those differences are, right? And I think that's something that we've really invested in and understand. I think part of it is, I've been focused on multifamily, my whole career in terms of energy efficiency. And I think there's a growing number of people that I think are kind of understanding the differences between, you know, non-for-profit owners, affordable housing, private equity, publicly traded REITs, family offices, co-ops and I mean, it just, the list goes on, right? And the way that those owners might look at their properties and their assets and make decisions about this is all quite different. So I think that's one of the challenges with multifamily, but for us, it's an opportunity if you're willing to, kind of understand how that all works and, make sure that the way that you're approaching those markets, accounts for the uniqueness of each little sub-vertical, if we want to call it that.
Okay, thanks. So what are you, given that education that you do with investors, then say they get it, they say, okay, fine, good, we understand now how you deal about it. Actually, if I would be on the investor side, I would say that even the fact that you spend already time on this gives you some, you are able to wall it off a little bit from the competitors because you already invested time to understand how that works, and developed a specific knowledge base for that, which would not be easy to replicate by any newcomer, not like in the typical software business. So, and then they would ask, okay, this is great. What are the plans for growth? How do you go 10x? What are your plans now?
Yeah. So, I mean, without getting into, more details than I probably should, I think the general approach is that, we, at the time that we raised our last round, but even still, really are just in Toronto and New York. We're now expanding into, New England, Mid-Atlantic, and plans to expand into some other markets. So we're really just even scratching the surface of what we can do within the multifamily sector, not even accounting for hotels or other verticals we might want to get into in the future. But, I think the fact that we are so focused on a given type of real estate is a real strength, right? Because it means that we can really make sure that we're meeting that customer where they are, and not trying to take a one-size-fits-all approach, which I think increasingly doesn't really work for real estate companies, right? Particularly from a technology point of view, because there's just an increasing amount of data out there. There's an increasing amount of things that people are looking to do with this information, and it really needs to be asset specific because there's just the type of information, the type of reporting that you're going to do is going to be so different for, logistics facility than it is for an apartment building in downtown Manhattan, that you really need to, I think, understand that and not try to put the same solution in every type of real estate. And I think with what we do, that's very true. When it comes back to the integration side of things, you've seen companies out there that have tried to, just plug into a BMS and deploy their software through the BMS without even really getting into the building or, understanding the underlying equipment. And that's tough. That's a really tough approach, because a lot of what we've talked about earlier in this conversation. So yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I think in real estate, the more you focus on a given asset class to start, and the more that you can be the dominant player in that asset class, I think the more leverage and opportunities you'll have in the future to trade on that brand that you've built, the strong customer relationships that you're going to have, that inevitably will be with large real estate operators that have different types of real estate, different verticals that will allow you to move into those verticals when the time is right. But yeah, again, it's just a really core part of what we're doing is not to grow too quick, not to expand too quick, so that the customer experience, the product, the value that we're delivering is diluted in any way.
Okay, that's great to hear. Is there, do you see any like major obstacle to pursuing this strategy, or something, a challenge that you must meet before? I mean, so you stay focused on the multifamily dwellings, you expand in this area, but maybe you see something that you will have to encounter like in a year or two, and which you have to, something which you have to deal with to continue growing in that space.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things that, we will need to be thinking about is, how we can get the solution deployed at scale, and how we can start working with more types of multifamily buildings to start. So, one of the things that I think we're thinking about is partnerships, right? So, who are the types of partners that can help us deploy and do these integrations? I think the outlook for our business in some ways is very tied to the real estate market, right? So, I think, want to make sure that, multifamily in particular, but hotels continue to have, healthy, balance sheets and good rent growth. And, just this week, the Federal Reserve here in the US dropped interest rates, for the first time in a long time. So some of these things I think will be helpful just in ensuring that multifamily as a sector continues to be really strong, and has the interest and capital available to invest in solutions like Parity. So I think that's another big kind of macro thing that's a bit outside of our control, but that we try to keep a pretty close eye on, as it impacts, again, where we're focusing, where we're growing.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the insight, James. And just a final question. What would you recommend other clean tech startups who are now entering the growth phase, what they should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'll talk about this kind of, maybe more specifically about green tech companies, or maybe focused on real estate, just because that's the sector of this industry that I know the most. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're not, a really great technology that's out there looking for a problem to solve, and instead, you're building your company from a this is the problem that we are trying to solve. Let's build our product and technology, that way, because there's so many different solutions out there. We hear all the time from customers and people that we're talking to on the real estate side that just have a hard time navigating through all the noise, as they call it, right? There's a lot of different technology companies out there, whether it's focused on energy or other parts of what you can do with technology to operate real estate. So it's really important that you have a very clear value proposition, and you're very clear about the problem that you're trying to solve, and you understand, how your solution is going to impact the type of property that you're focused on. Because again, the way that a energy solution is going to interact with a office building is going to be very different from multifamily, and you can say that across a lot of different types of asset classes. So yeah, that focus and that understanding of how it fits into the type of real estate that you're pursuing is critical.
Okay. Can I say that, if I summarize it, that you have to make it easy for the customer?
Yes. Yes, that's
Going back
that's
to
exactly
what we
right.
started with, yes.
Yeah, if you remember those old Staples commercials where it's just a big red easy button, or maybe those are just running in the
I'm
US,
not
but
from the US, yeah, but
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
For our US listeners, that would ring a bell.
yeah, but yeah, the easier you can make it, the better. And I think the way you make it easy is to really understand your customer in a lot of depth, so that you can solve problems, allow your solution to fit into the way they make decisions, and how they look at their assets.
Okay. Thank you very much for this great insight, James. And it was a pleasure to talk to you and to hear you speaking about energy efficiency, which is the area for me for a long time was, great thing to have, but nobody could actually do it, the proper way. So it's great to know that you've cracked this code, so to say, with your software. And I wish you all the best. I wish your company more growth. Uh, Stay focused, and hope to see you sometime on an IPO.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, I hope to see that too. But thanks again for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you very much, James. Bye.